Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to today's webinar. We're happy to have your time for the next little while. My name is Marcia Bastos. I'm the marketing manager here at SPLICE Software, and I won't go into too many details about myself so we can jump right into the experts. But before we do that, there's a couple of housekeeping items that I have for you. Our webinar today will run about 45 minutes, and there will be 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. We have a hard stop at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so we don't want to keep you for any longer. You may submit your questions if you have any time, starting right now. On the right-hand side, you'll see a Q&A window, so feel free to submit your questions there, and we'll address them at the end. Next is an exciting note. This webinar, of course, is being recorded, so we will share it out with you and the slides next week. And we do have an additional prize draw than was communicated. So after today, you'll find out if you've won a free 2-hour consultation with Customer Experience University, who you're going to meet today, and SPLICE Software. And another winner will also receive a free Customer Experience University online course. So that's enough of housekeeping. Now's the agenda. Today we're going to learn about customer centricity, why does it matter, and how you can approach it smartly, who the key players are when it comes to thinking about customer centricity, and when to seek leadership and alignment imperatives. CX University, our first speaker, is from a company that's committed to helping you know more and be able to do more in the customer experience discipline. They offer quality professional development programs that appropriately challenge you to gain knowledge and skills in the fundamentals and best practices of customer experience. That's customer experience if you haven't heard the abbreviation, CX. From comprehensive online courses to custom designed action learning workshops, as well as certification prep for the CCXP exam, CXU prepares practitioners to provide excellence in the discipline. Next is Dr. Latib. He's the founder and CEO of CXU, and he's our first speaker. His expertise in management and executive development spans a 30-year-long journey of shaping corporate leaders and team members from small organizations to Forbes companies across the globe. He's worked extensively with senior management, HR departments, engineers, and customer service representatives. Dr. Latib has also led classrooms and college departments as a professor, dean, and vice president at renowned universities across the United States. He has served as a board member for numerous academic-based organizations. Next is SPLICE Software. We're the host. We were founded in 2006, and we're a private company that is headquartered in Canada with offices located in the United States and Germany. SPLICE offers a cloud-based dialogue suite that specializes in using big data and artificial intelligence to create distinctly human messaging. Our patented software sends automated voice and SMS in the right moment of the customer journey to drive optimal engagement and the desired call to action. Our suite enables you to collect and manage customers' permissions and preferences so you can personalize, communicate, and measure like never before. Next is Janelle Boris. She's a retail specialist here at SPLICE Software who brings 10 years of retail experience to the table. With an everyday focus of driving success for her SPLICE clients, Janelle uses her passion for client relations and accurate program design to ensure SPLICE maintains an unparalleled level of customer engagement and retention. Her account management has led SPLICE clients to both customer engagement and store operations awards, and she looks forward to bringing these valuable insights and tools to future clients and the industry in general to aid in the maximization of the in-store customer experience. Off to you, Dr. Latib, to kick off the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcia, and welcome to all of our guests who are attending this webinar with us today. I am delighted to be here to share some thoughts and perhaps convey some observations that you might find useful. Let me set the context for our conversation this afternoon, and it has to do with dramatic shifts, seriously dramatic shifts that are occurring in the business world. And this is not new. We have seen the evolution of change in our business climate surfacing since the advent of the internet. So we go back maybe 15 years, perhaps 20 for some of us who are early in this game. The internet has helped to transform our business landscape. And with the advent and infusion of these new technologies that have surfaced, it has literally transformed our organizations to participate now in a global reality that is characterized by a democratization. What exactly does that mean? It means that no longer does anybody anywhere in the globe have a monopoly on either information, knowledge, and perhaps most importantly, access. So we're seeing a level playing field, and this level playing field is now being even more changed by a growing shift in the power balance from corporations that commanded markets to customers that are changing the dynamics by imposing significant demands. So we have, in some sense, for those of you that might be familiar with Friedman's book on the flattening of the globe, we are seeing an increased flattening occurring today, but this time with a flat globe that's being resurfaced by the power of the customer. So what does that mean? And if you look at the slide you're looking at, that power is being expressed by customers in the form of demands that say, I want immediate responses. I do not have time. I want you also to get to know me, personalize your interactions with me. I am, yes, indeed interested in your quality products, but I'm also interested in establishing a relationship on my terms. And companies, therefore, are being forced to respond to those terms. Those terms are not just in terms of service quality, although that's important, but they want transparency in communications, and they want to build this trusting relationship. And here's the kicker, which is demanding on organizations in business, and that is to anticipate the needs of the customers. And we're seeing this marvelous balance evolve in our business systems because we are leveraging technology in creative ways to respond to the demands of our customer population, regardless of which industry we might be participating in. Let's have the next slide there, Marcia. So if you're familiar with Gilmore and Pines, two well-known authors that published an article and subsequently several books on describing how the evolution of business has shifted into what we today call an experience economy. And in an experience economy, the thread that is significant is around delivering or staging, as they might have said, an exemplary customer experience. And what does that mean? It means the following. It means that you have to become sensitive to all of the touch points that are important to customers. You have to be able to address and respond to their expectations, whatever they might be. And as has become even more significant recently, and 2016, as a matter of fact, is being characterized as a year where the focus is on how do we touch customers' hearts? How do we impact them emotionally? And that's expressed in the following slide. Marcia, if you would just go to the next one. So look at the customers and look at what they're saying today. Imagine the flip that's occurred in how we interact with our customers in our market, where we used to produce products and say this is what customers will buy, to a reversal where customers are saying, oh no, I will not buy what you are going to produce. I will buy what I want you to produce. So this shift in power balance has created this increased energy around refocusing organizational systems around the customer, which is why we're going to talk about customer centricity today and how you create a culture. And perhaps how you create a culture may be a strong term to use here. It's what considerations must you have on your plate in order to be able to respond effectively to the kinds of issues that are being addressed in the slide that you're looking at. So think about this. The customer is now saying, I want you to communicate the way I want you to communicate. I use devices in almost everything I do. I even want you to tell me if my feedback has had an impact. I want to be able to see evidence of any kind of hearing and understanding that has occurred on the part of organizations. So the demands, as you can see, are increasing almost exponentially. And this automatically, and if it appeals to your logic, automatically requires a serious attention to the customer. Now, you might even think about this, but let me have the next slide, please, Marcia. You might think about this in terms of the realities. And the realities of business are clearly brought to bear when you know that customers have an impact on your financial performance. Just look at the evidence that's presented here on the basis of some research work. We recognize that the mahogany suites of the corporate world, regardless of whether it's in the US, Canada, in Europe, or other parts of the world, executives are saying, yes, customers need to be our focus. Paradoxically, while they're paying attention to the reality that they are faced with, the execution around that reality is obviously problematic, as you can see by the kinds of items that are listed on this slide. And indeed, we're finding that companies are beginning to repositioning themselves competitively in spaces that allow them to respond to those demands that are being placed upon companies by the new power of the customers that surface from the incredible capacity that they have with technology. Let's move more specifically. This is the most recent. Show me the next slide, would you please, Marcia? This is perhaps the most significant in terms of the bottom line. The most recent report that I read from the Temkin Group, just look at the evidence here, and this is recent in the sense of a 2016 data set that says even a moderate increase in responding to the demands of the customer translates into significant flow of revenues, growth, profitability, acquisition of customers, retention of existing customers to the tune of millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. Basically, the storyline is fairly straightforward. You cannot, any organization worth its salt, simply cannot ignore the realities of this new business landscape where the customer needs to become a central focus. And that's really the ultimate and basic purpose of our meeting this morning. So let me continue and share with you what I see as the new realities that we need to be paying attention to. Marcia, show me the next slide, please. And these new realities are at one level new, at another level fairly old. So the new realities are characterized, from my perspective, in terms of focusing on what I call two new normals. In order to be able to build a competitive advantage in the markets that companies serve, they must focus not just on customers, for which I think I've already made a compelling case just by sharing some stats, but there's also the second face to the whole approach that we have with winning customers and winning competitively, and that's on our employees. So our focus today is going to be on some considerations that you need to keep in front of you around building a customer-centric culture with a focus on two very strong and important components of organizational realities: the customers in the first instance and employees in the first instance. Notice I didn't say second instance because I think both are equally important in the design and delivery of not only an exemplary customer experience, but in establishing a customer-centric culture. So let's look at what that means. The next slide, please. So the first new normal is a focus on customers. And many of you that have touched the CX discipline have probably heard of customer journey mapping. Keep in mind that the customer phenomena is not new. From the time that we started businesses, and you can go back from the time we started recording knowledge, the role of the customer was clearly important. How we've responded to that customer has shifted over the years, and more recently has made it a central focus on how we conduct business. And one of the tools that we have designed in the last several years is understanding every single step that a customer has to take in his or her engagement with a business. And that gets translated in the form of this wonderful tool that we in the CX discipline refer to as building or crafting or designing a customer experience journey map, so that we can understand all of the interaction points that are important to our customers. Now, having said that, by itself is not sufficient, because if you are going to design an organization that establishes the customer as a core component of its ethos, as part of its DNA, so to speak, it has to be attentive to all of the major variables that comprise a systemic response to the demands of the customer. Those elements of a systemic response have to do with all the variables that you're looking at on this slide. So it's critical, for instance, to establish a strategic direction where the customer becomes a central element of an organization's strategic thrust. It has to redesign work, so to speak, so that it builds appropriate structural arrangements. It has to revamp all of its practices, its policies, even to the tune of focusing on employee behavior, so that the tasks that they have been assigned are tasks that can be embraced with the customer in mind. Of course, the role of technology is almost self-evident, and we will see that not only through what we're seeing around us today, but all of us are familiar with the power of the tools we have, such as our smartphones, and all of us that are attending this session, I assume, use mobile devices. And these mobile devices, as I indicated earlier, gives us access to information and knowledge like never before in the history of human civilization. Now, having said that, keep in mind that this is, as a matter of fact, easier said than done. In order to be able to establish the customer as a core, one needs to be attentive to all of these key variables that allow us to build a solid systemic response. Show me the next slide, please, Marcia. Now, one of the major challenges we have is not only are we feeling this new pressure, but internal dynamics in organizations are going through turbulent times, because these new demands are placing new responsibilities on organizations. And the challenge really is on how do we not only embrace and absorb the demands, but do so that we have a machine that's well-oiled. And so we cannot afford to operate in silos. Just think about this for a moment. Assume for a moment that you as a customer receives a bill that has a mistake on it. You will not point to a particular individual deep in the billing department of a corporation for having made a mistake, if indeed it was a mistake. They look at the brand. They don't look at the billing department. So when you see a mistake in a bill, for instance, you never say, oh, this is the fault of Mohammed, who works as a clerk in the billing department of XYZ Corporation. They say it's an XYZ Corporation issue, and so your brand reputation can be adversely affected by a simple mistake made deep in the organization. The principle that surfaces from that example, as simplistic as it might sound, is really a call to be very attentive to the power of alignment. We need to be fully aligned in order to be able to deliver an exemplary experience and at the same time allow us to be able to build a strong customer-focused culture. Let's go a little further than that. Next slide, please. Thank you, Marcia. Clearly, leadership plays a very important role in this process. In fact, this whole arena of customer experience is actually demanding new leadership approaches. And so even leaders are beginning to recognize that a response to the customer is not an event. A response to a customer is a continuous process, and that's why I like the term marathon. Leadership never begins and stops. Leadership is an ongoing phenomena that pays attention to issues of branding, to issues of aligning our internal resources, to responding to the voice of the customer, and to accept and embrace the demanding challenge of change and transformation. In other words, it's a never-ending cycle that is continuous. It is about as continuous as the continuous demands that customers are placing upon organizations. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, you know, one of the things that I want to alert you to, all of this sounds grand. All of this sounds really terrific, except that when you meet reality, you get smacked in different directions. And so the question becomes, if it's so obvious for us to do so, why is it so difficult? Well, I've already alluded to why it's difficult by making reference to the notion of alignment. First and foremost, you need to get all of the stakeholders in an organization to agree on a common thrust. Yet, having established the case for a common thrust, we find internally that sometimes executives, because of their particular interests and responsibilities, will actually drift away. So they will shift from common ground. They will shift away because their particular functions and responsibilities may not be customer-facing. And even those of us that are in the CX discipline, with it being as new as it is, have the challenge of even convincing internal stakeholders about the value of buying into the demands that customers are placing upon us. The other challenge is that even if we accept that there's common ground, and if there is, even if there's support from leadership, to try and have your internal stakeholders, employees, shift their behaviors, to try and crack through boundaries that are impermeable within organizations, and especially around data, folks, because all of our work in the CX discipline to a large extent is driven by data. And it's not uncommon to find now with the different functions in organizations that people internally begin to guard the data that they possess. And in order to be able to build, as I called it, a systemic response to the demands of customers, you need to crack through those barriers, build an aligned system, and even internally restructure your incentive and reward structures so that they are fully congruent with establishing the customer as the core and the expectations that a company has of its people to be able to do just that, focusing on the customer as the core. At this point, I think I can pass on to Janelle. Let me see the next slide. Oh no, let me address this one before I pass the baton on to Janelle for her observations. Staying with the issue of behavior, I want to simply illustrate, and I'm not going to read this out to many of you, except to point out that the examples you see at the bottom of the slide, the poor examples, sound really good, don't they? We hear people say we listen to customers, we understand customers' needs, we work with our internal stakeholders. That is good, but not sufficient. We need to actually be much more explicit about what it means to say we listen to our customers. It means to do the kinds of things that we see above. We keep the voice of the customers front and center. We anticipate, we look for their needs so that we can make them part of the organization in every way that we can express ourselves through the delivery of the experience that we wish to deliver. These are just examples for you to keep in mind. It allows you to fine-tune the distinction between what sounds good versus what is really good to do. And I'll invite Janelle to share some thoughts along those lines with what she has to share.
Thanks, Mohamed. So as Mohamed just said a moment ago, some companies are on the right track but can fall a little short. A company that I previously did business with decided that they would like to gather customer feedback through voice NPS surveys. So NPS can be a great tool. It can be used to gauge the loyalty of a firm's customers' relationships, but the thing to remember is that the NPS result is much more than just a score. Customers should be asked the reasons for their ratings using an unstructured, open-ended question. This provides employees throughout the organization the opportunity to hear comments from their customers every day and in their customers' own words. The leaders in the organization that I'm speaking of can then build that feedback into their operating systems, using it both to address customer concerns and to fuel the innovations that generate more promoters. So they can use this closed loop to learn more about how they can improve their processes, people, products, and pricing for the long term. So the company that I mentioned before knew how important it was to gather the feedback to improve their customer experience, and they had alignment at their top level for introducing the program to their company and for gathering the feedback. So they implemented a seamless solution that collected feedback, but they resisted to create a closed loop process. Their success criteria and the process for closing the loop were never defined. This organization was not closing the loop with their customers. They would send the survey as customers felt, leaving room for suggested improvements, but they had no follow-up. They did not gather any more information about why customers were scoring them the way they were, and this is where they fell short. Without this key element of the program, they were losing out on some truly valuable customer feedback. Your customers want to know that they are being heard, that their feedback matters, and if there's no follow-up, then the customer might become disenchanted with your brand and take their business elsewhere. To magnify the decision, this company was also not sharing any of their results with their organization. In fact, a lot of the people that worked with this organization were unaware that they were even deploying this survey. So your organization cannot grow from customer feedback if you do not know what exactly the customers are saying. It won't grow if your customers aren't aware that you have listened to their feedback once they took the time to give it to you. It is so important to have the success criteria for a customer experience initiative well defined from the get-go. It is just as important as you paying your bills, basically. If this criteria is not defined and follow through on, then you will never be able to get the most out of your program. In the end, this company decided to halt their survey until they could define their success criteria and have a process in place that would close the loop. So they had the right idea, but they fell short on the follow-through and lost resources, and possibly they could have lost some customers as well. So not everyone gets it wrong. Some of you may be the ones who have mastered CX already, but there is always room for improvement. Next slide, please, Marcia. So I used to do business with a clothing retailer, and this was a retailer that I felt went above and beyond in terms of customer service and training compared to other companies that I have dealt with. This company noticed that they had a decline in their new signups for their loyalty program. So their loyalty program basically offered a discount to any member that signed up on any purchase and communications regarding special events for them. So to address this pain, they decided to send out a survey to the customers regarding everything from service at store level to corporate policies. Many people were surprised by their survey results. One of the areas that they scored lower than expected on was in creating total looks for their customer. So when I say total looks in this case, it meant their customers actually wanted them to show more items that would go with a relevant purchase that they were already making. So if they were shopping for pants for a night out, then they wanted to see some tops and accessories that would complete the look for them. So this seemed very contrary to the popular belief that customers wanted to avoid those stereotypical interactions with pushy retailers who try to peddle more purchases. A lot of the sales team in this organization were afraid to come across as too pushy, so they were holding back in that instance. However, all the while, those customers were wanting more options, and they listened to their customers and heard them from the feedback. So this brings to light a very important insight. Businesses should never assume. You can never think you know what your customer is going to do without asking them or without looking at analytics that show trends. But even in this case, you should verify that information against your customers. So this company shared their survey results company-wide, and this had an enormous impact on how all employees viewed their customers and how they were able to serve them. They implemented new training processes based on the survey results for the staff in order to help them get past their own preconceptions and created a huge impact that customers felt. So now Mohamed is going to talk a little bit more about employees and how they play a large role in customer centricity. Back to you, Mohamed.
Thank you, Janelle. So let me just backtrack one step. I think I just shared some thoughts about really pushing a company's center of gravity outside the organization. That's what we mean by making the customer a core component of an organization's work. The paradox is that there's another center of gravity that organizations must focus on, and that's on their employees. So it's a paradox. On the one hand, we're saying push your center of gravity outside the organization. On the other hand, we're saying, but don't forget, there is another core component of organizational realities that we must be attentive to. Show me the next slide, would you please, Marcia? And that's our people. And just look at our people, our employees. You remember from days past, the mantra was people first, people first, people first. Well, even people are beginning to hold organizations accountable. And they are this new breed of employees, associates, whatever it is we want to call them. These are folks that are saying, I need to be engaged as well. And it is incumbent upon organizations to be attentive to that call. If they do not engage employees, think about the consequences. Show me the next slide, would you please? Think about the consequences. The consequences are fairly obvious. I made reference to the list of items on the right-hand side earlier when I talked about the increased demands being placed upon corporations by customers. Well, who is going to deliver those? It's a very simple equation. The people that deliver to those demands are the associates or employees in our organization. In order for them to do this, they must be fully engaged. But there's an inherent value for engaging them. You want them engaged because they will be more productive. They will deliver higher levels of performance. They will be attentive to the financial health of the organization. They will, like customers, become promoters of their own brands that they're part of, where they earn their livelihood. Retention issues become relevant. All of these elements, by the way, folks, is absolutely critical and required in building a customer-centric culture. Let me actually share with you some common threads that create linkages between those associates that have to be a core component of organizational realities and those customers out there that we serve. Show me the next slide, would you please? Now, my focus here is on the engagement of employees, but you'll see the obvious linkage to customers with the labeling and the language that I'm going to share with you right now. Employees that are engaged are also, like customers, people who want to feel good about their organizations. So even companies have to be attentive to the hearts of their employees. they have to be attentive to how their employees or associates think, because they want the combination of how they feel and how they think to manifest in the form of appropriate behaviors that are important internally, but also important in terms of customer-centric responses. The combination is what allows us to have an engaged workforce. Now, what's the common thread and the linkage I wanted to make? Apply the same concepts to the customer. The customer's heart has to be influenced, so they must feel good. That's the emotional piece. You want to be able to convey the right message to your customers so that you can have them think about your brand in a particular manner. And of course, you want those to translate into behaviors that are, I will stay with you, I will advocate for you, I will share a bigger share of my wallet with you, I will talk about you, I will help build your reputation. And that's what we're driving for, because the common element in the associate population and the customer population is that we're all human beings and are therefore affected by our emotions and our thought processes and our behaviors. I just want to leave you with one last thought around associate engagement, a very simple measure of whether or not you have an engaged employee or associate population in your organization is simply to observe how much of discretionary behaviors they display. This would be characterized by going above and beyond the call of duty. These are folks that will give of themselves wholeheartedly so that they can serve the organization's purpose. Let's go to the next slide, would you please? Thank you. So, if you're going to focus on employees and you're going to focus on customers, change is an essential element of this reality. And that means that you have to, from a leadership perspective, be able to establish a culture where there's shared understanding, a culture where there's free flow of communications, standards, practices, policies, reward structures, developmental opportunities, and of course, recognition. We also are beginning to recognize increasingly, for those of us that are in the CX discipline, we're actually finding that being expressed in the reality of job posts these days. Even jobs are now being described in terms of specific requirements as having a customer-centered attitude or a customer-focused approach to how they do things. So even our hiring practices are beginning to shift. And if we build the appropriate internal mechanisms, we certainly would move in the direction of establishing an organization that has a customer-centric disposition. Let's look at the next slide, please. So, at the risk of sounding like I'm repeating myself, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that if you want to become customer-centric, understand your customer journey. And don't understand a single journey, because there are multiple journeys that customers take, because businesses operate in multiple channels. And so you need to understand all the paths that come to your brand. I call it, or we call it in the systems thinking world, as having a omnipresence. So you've got to be present everywhere, and you've got to understand the role that these touch points and journeys and how they influence our people and all of our internal variables that are so critical for alignment purposes. Let's look at the next slide, please. To continue this logic of offering tips, we also need to measure. And many of you that are familiar with Drucker will recognize that if you can't measure something, then it's useless. And in the customer experience field, for those of us that practice this discipline, we recognize that measurement is important, so we've built all kinds of measurement tools. We've built metrics that allow us to be able to assess how well we're doing relative to our customers. And the idea here is to build a continuous feedback process that allows us to be able to tap into the customer's at the pace at which they demand us to, instantly. So, for instance, in the retail arena, which is where Janelle has a significant amount of play, the feedback process is almost always continuous. It is not treated as an event. You continuously seek feedback so that you can continuously engage your customers in meaningful relationship engagement. Let's look at the next slide, please. Now, I shared this slide. Many of you may or may not be familiar with some of the items here, but let me run through this quickly by way of telling you what kind of consequence customers are having. Zappos comes to mind, and many of you know Zappos as sort of a model that companies want to emulate. They've even decided to completely restructure their organizational form. And so they've adopted this new phenomena called Holacracy. They've gotten rid of hierarchy. They've gotten rid of the kind of boundaries that would otherwise keep people muzzled in their little corner in the organization, doing their work and doing it well, I must confess. But nevertheless, they're breaking these barriers and allowing a more holistic response to the phenomena of their customer in the markets they serve. And think about customer experience for a moment. It's a complex phenomena. Customer experience is not just satisfaction. I think we've already at the level of sounding simple, we said that we need to touch their hearts, we need to touch their minds. Now think about that. If it's complex, then our jobs must align with that complexity. And that's why you cannot have what I call an algorithmic response to customers. You need to build jobs that have heuristic properties, which means you give your associates autonomy. You give them the ability to be able to respond. Corporate executives are now beginning to think about this in very practical terms, such as, let's keep an empty chair around the strategy desk. And that empty chair is a metaphor for the customer. So whatever discussions happen in the Mahogany Suite, they have this phantom customer sitting there and asking the question of themselves, are we hearing the customer's point of view? How would the customer react to the issues we're discussing? Are we aligning ourselves well so that we can address the demands the customers are making? There isn't an organization I know that does this as well as W.L. Gordon Associates does it. You may know them for their product famously known as Gore-Tex. It's a high-end fabric manufacturer, among other things that they do on the high end. W.L. Gordon Associates has built a lattice culture, very much along the concept of holacracy. They've removed hierarchies, they've removed titles. Everyone is an associate, and they have very few titles. In fact, I would cite that as an example of a company that probably demonstrates leadership at its best. They define leadership quite simply as anyone that has followers. Think about that. I would invite you to check out W.L. Gordon Associates, and then reference to metrics have been made. Janelle has already talked about Net Promoter Score, and then the newest measures are how do we make the life of our customer easy, so we call it the effort score. And as I suggested a moment ago, 2016 has been declared the age of emotions, the year of emotions. We need to measure how people actually feel so that we can respond to them in a manner that's appropriate. Let's go to the next slide. What I want to do, oh, this is your piece, Janelle, I'm sorry. That's your piece, and I'll come back after you're done.
That's okay. Thanks, Mohamed. So this is just an example of how the little things matter. So the finances and industry relationships are everything, and in most cases will be the reason why a customer chooses one advisor or bank over another. So for attendees today in finance, I want you to think about how you ensure your customers have a great experience. So one thing that you need to know is that the little things really do matter to your customers. To start, you need to have an emphasis on security. So RBC, for example, has mastered this by offering a security guarantee for their online bankers. And it basically states that if any unauthorized transaction is conducted through your RBC online banking service, you will be 100% reimbursed for any resulting losses to the account. So that's a great example of knowing your customer and offering them what they want. Next, you can make technology a helpful tool. So for example, TD Canada Trust offers an app called TD MySpend. It was released this year as a free app for all of their customers. So the TD MySpend is a smart, easy-to-use app that helps you monitor your spending from your personal banking accounts and credit card accounts. Now, I know that there are a lot of apps on the market like this, but instead of making their customers choose one of those apps and link all of their accounts to it, customers can conveniently get the app from a trusted and already connected source. Now, it's also very important for businesses to make small efforts toward greater causes. A great way to do this is connect with your community. So, for example, the CIBC hosts the Run for the Cure for Breast Cancer. Scotiabank sponsors the AIDS Walk. Customers really like to see your involvement in helping your community grow. And lastly, this should go without saying, but companies need to communicate with your customers. So many people originally start out with a bank based off of family decisions. Many people's first bank account is started by their parents, or they may have family members who work for a specific bank, and that is why they are with them. So I will tell a little story. I have a coworker whose banking needs evolved as she got older, and they were looking for opportunities to invest and save for those larger life purchases down the road. However, their bank did not communicate on an ongoing basis with them, leaving them unaware of the products or services available that could help them make these decisions. So my coworker turned to her family and friends for advice, and learning about other financial institutions, she actually ended up switching. So this bank, the new bank, optimally leveraged the data that they supplied to provide relevant multi-channel communications with her. So customers require regular communications from their financial institutions in order to feel comfortable in their experience. Even if the customer doesn't have a current need for what your business provides, staying in touch with an email or phone call can help reassure them that you are still interested in helping them. And I believe Mohamed has an excellent example next in regards to this.
Excellent. Thank you, Janelle. So what I'd like to do is we're going to bring close to this with two examples. And the idea of sharing these examples is to make what we have shared in a very, very short time period palpable for you. And I'd like to refer you to Umpqua Bank. It's a Northwest regional bank organization headquartered in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. Here's an organization that has actually driven its center of gravity outside of itself. And here's how it's doing it. It is really transforming the banking industry. You're looking at a picture of a typical branch, and look at that branch. Umpqua Bank recognizes that the customers are so important that they actually appeal to all their five senses in their relationship building with their customers. And they go beyond that. They go so far beyond that, that when you want a meeting place, you meaning the community, if a Little League group wants a meeting place, if parents want to organize some kind of conversation around a local community issue or event, they actually get free meeting spaces in the bank in the evenings. Just think about that. Their color scheme, look at the lounges. It's like you're walking into someone's living room rather than a typical banking sanitized brick and mortar space. Umpqua Bank is one of the fastest growing banks precisely because it has successfully shifted its focus on the customer to be so rich that it invites customers into a deep and intimate relationship, all of it being expressed in the form of Umpqua Bank's financial growth. It is exponential. Let me share a second example with you. Next slide, please. Many of you are familiar with the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. I couldn't think of a better example than to be able to illustrate for you how both associates and customers have been fully integrated. This is an example of how strategy and practice has been fully integrated. There's complete congruence in this organization in this very simple statement that you see here. Ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, in the first instance, are our associates. ladies and gentlemen, in the second instance, are those that we serve, our customers. I couldn't think of a better example to share with you how significantly the Ritz-Carlton Hotel has adopted its focus on both new normals, the employee and the customer. I invite you to check them out, and you'll get a deeper appreciation of what it means to become a customer-centric organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Mohamed. So we've reached the time for Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I invite any attendees who haven't already submitted a question to do so. You'll see on the right-hand side at the top of your screen a little box that says Q&A. Go ahead and submit any questions. And we do have a couple, so I'll start with the first one. Dr. Latib, here's one for you. How do I bring this idea to the board to make them understand the impact? And I'm assuming that is customer centricity.
Well, actually, it goes beyond just customer centricity. It's a larger issue. How do you bring to senior leadership, you've called it the board, it could be anyone in senior leadership, how do you make a case for them that says we need to adopt a customer-centric focus? It's an iterative process. This is where some new thinking comes into play, and it comes out of our design thinking arena. You know, there's a lot of resistance to something that's new, and focus on customer experience is new. Building a customer-centric culture is new. So there's going to be a lot of resistance. And so in order to obtain buy-in, it's important to be able to engineer a process where you can co-opt your senior leadership into a solution. What does that mean? And this is what it means in very practical terms. If you were sitting there trying to make a case and you went to your senior leadership, here's what I propose you consider. And it comes right out of design thinking principles. And here they are. First and foremost, this is what we want to do. Here are the reasons for doing so. Offer compelling business outcome metrics. And then ask, how does this match with your views? In other words, let a conversation with your boss, your manager, or the leadership feed the next step. The next step would be, all right, given that we have an agreed problem definition, here are the possibilities that we would consider. And then go back and say, how does this fit with your thinking? Anything else? Is there anything we're considering that are non-starters for you? In asking these questions, executives are offered the opportunity to not only share their views, but to also take ownership. And keep that in mind. That's very critical. And then when you return to them to discuss the proposed initiative, discuss the analysis that will be done on the agreed possibilities, and ask if it meets their expectations and whether or not there's anything else that you want them for you to consider. So the process is very simple. Involve them to participate in the definition of the initiative, confirm the possibilities and agree on the analysis that needs to be done, and then establish a business case where they become part owners of the initiative.
Perfect, thank you. We did have one quick question also come in about asking if these slides will be sent. So yes, the slides and the recording will be sent to everyone who registered and attended in 1 week's time. And so there's another one as well. This one is not directed to anyone in particular, but they're asking, do you recommend bringing a customer experience expert on board or kind of focusing on an internal approach?
Do you want me to take that, or Janelle, do you want to take that?
Well, I can give my thoughts, but I would definitely value your opinion since you are the expert in this matter. I would recommend bringing a CX expert on board. They'd be able to help you make a plan to succeed, and they can ask you those questions that you might not think about. If you think back earlier to my example of the NPS survey, I think a customer experience expert could have helped them define that success criteria and put a close the loop in place so that their program could have been more successful. Mohamed, if you would like to offer your thoughts as well.
Yeah, let me be very practical about this. And so let me ask rhetorical questions. Do you know what a customer experience strategy is? Have you ever built and designed a customer journey map? Do you understand what kinds of metrics are out there? Are you familiar with all the technologies that are available to you so that you can have continuous feedback systems available to you in dashboards that you can readily use to take action? And I'm going to stop there. I rattled off a few important questions. If the answer is no, you need a customer experience expert to come in and guide you and help you. So I concur with Janelle's observation. You do need to bring a customer experience expert in because the field has developed quite rapidly over the last 5 years, and there's a lot going on that experts can bring quickly to bear so that you can be ready to compete competitively. I was just recently, 6 weeks ago, brought into a company that said, we need help. We understand our markets, we understand our customers, but we don't understand the phenomena of customer experience different from the legacy that they're accustomed to. And I want you to know this. There's a significant difference between customer service and customer experience. Customer service is the legacy that companies have inherited historically. Today, we are talking about a whole new landscape, and I would submit you need a customer experience expert to guide you and help you.
Perfect, thank you. So we've got about 4 minutes left, so we'll squeeze in. Oh, did I cut you off, Janelle? Did you want to add anything to that?
Nope, I'm okay.
Perfect. We'll squeeze in one more. So let me choose. Does the employee or the customer always come first when tackling centricity? And that is addressed to Mohamed, but both of you can take a crack at that.
That's a chicken and egg question. Which one comes first? I would submit that this is not a case of which one comes first. I think it's a case of both being treated equally. You simply cannot perform competitively in your markets without carefully juxtaposing your focus on the customer and the employee. It's about, metaphorically speaking, like trying to fit a glove into your hand. You need the right hand and the right size glove. And I think there's got to be an intimate marriage, just as I illustrated in the example of the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. A marriage, an intimate marriage between your employees and your customers. And just look at Ritz-Carlton in terms of their performance. Look at Zappos in terms of their performance. Look at any of the organizations that are considered leaders in the customer experience delivery, and you will see that they outperform laggards by a mile. So the answer quite simply is you've got to do both.
Lovely. So that is all the time we have for today. I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Mohamed and Janelle, for your time and preparing that presentation. Thank you for the attendees for staying on and listening to us and giving us your time. So as I mentioned, in 1 week's time, you will get the slides and the recording of the webinar. We will also be announcing the 2 winners. So if you missed that at the beginning, we are choosing a winner from the attendees for a free online Customer Experience University course. And we are also choosing from all registrants a winner who will receive a free 2-hour consultation with CX University and SPLICE software. And we can kind of help you get started in understanding how customer experience will work for you. I'm going to shut things down. Thank you again, everyone, and take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.